Me too.
Those elephants are best in that.
Yes, they are.
Those elephants way over.
Well, we're hoping to have
Yeah.
on my birthday, Mom and Dad.
We're praying for you.
So we try to have a little something on her birthday. Last year we had a big one. All the family. Everybody got
Gotta get over that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know.
That's my goal.
But they're going to do that water thing.
Oh,
I'm gonna go my food.
oh, that'd be nice. Did you hear that?
Unfortunately, yes.
I'll come do the.
Now.
And I'm gonna have nightmares.
Now, I started to say, now you're gonna picture that in your head.
Thank you.
So every time you look this way and you see him.
Hey, you need a bigger mask there, Joe.
You need blinders.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. All right. Let's. All right, well, I guess we're about ready to get started. Now that Bob's here.
Mr. Bob.
Mr. Bob. Senor Bob.
Esquire.
Or Bobo. All right. Well, a very good morning, everybody. And I hope everybody's doing well this morning and all that good stuff. Can't believe it's already July. July. Yeah, it is. The year's flying by. Which, if it'll get us past all this junk, then that'll be all right. All right. Well, everybody have a copy of this morning's lesson. Anybody need a copy of the material this morning for our Revelation class? Anybody need a copy? I don't see anybody. All right, and this morning we will be on lesson 8 in the material, which is on page 49, and that's where we'll be today. And then we'll be covering in the book of Revelation. We'll be covering chapters 12 and 13 this morning. And this thing's going to get even more interesting than they already are. So we'll get into that in just a moment. All right. All right. Well, let's begin this morning with a word of prayer. And John Smith, if you would you lead us in prayer? And then we'll get into our study together this morning.
Heavenly Father, we are always grateful for you and this time and your word that instructs us how that you would have us to be. I'm thankful that we can gather together this time to study your word. Pray, Father, that we will look into it and become more knowledgeable, that we will be able to use that knowledge to serve you better. That's the name we pray.
Amen. All right. So, chapter 12 is where we're going to get started this morning. And the focus, well, not really the focus, but the imagery is going to change quite a bit here. As it points out there in the material, this is the halfway point, really a breaking point, or whatever you want to call it, the book of Revelation. As the imagery is going to change and kind of look at another perspective, as he talks about there in the material. And again, what has been the message so far of Revelation? All right, so Christ is going to be triumphant. He is going to be victorious over those who rejected him and killed him. And because of that, because Jesus is victorious, who else is then victorious? Yeah, his church, his people, those who follow Christ will be victorious as well. And they were enduring a lot of persecution. They were then, and there was still more persecution to come. Christians were being arrested, being punished, being killed, enduring great conflict and great persecution from whom? Who was persecuting the Christians? The Jews? The unbelieving Jews. Who else? The Romans. I mean, really, who wasn't persecuting the church, right? Basically, almost anybody that was not a believer at some point or another were persecuting the church. But again, the Revelation is a book of comfort and hope for the saints and what they're suffering, because not only does God promise them, eternal life and comfort and rest, but God also is promising and showing that He is going to do what with those who are persecuting His people? What's that? Vengeance. He's going to bring judgment upon them. And that's what we've been seeing in all of these imageries. Again, ultimately, the scope of how we're looking at Revelation is this is before the destruction of Jerusalem. That seems to be part of the great impending judgment that is coming, that this book is talking about, that will be coming soon upon the Jews and the whole Jewish system, upon Jerusalem. But then also, Rome would have its turn. God was going to use Rome to punish, to bring judgment upon the Jews, but then it would eventually be Rome's turn to be punished and judged for their own sins. And so he talks about there in the material the first 11 chapters, and I think this may be one of our questions if I remember right. Yeah, it is. Question number 1. What is the theme of the first half of the book of Revelation? This is question number 1 on page 53. All right, so Jesus is victorious. Jesus is triumphant. Seems to be the focus of the first 11 chapters. And then as we get into the second half now, it's beginning in chapter 12 through the rest of the book, what does the theme seem to be? Does he say? So Jesus was victorious, but now also who is going to be victorious? His church, the saints, will have victory over their persecutors. And so we've seen a lot of imagery already. John has been given these symbolic visions. He has seen a lot of strange things, powerful things, some good, a lot bad, because of the judgment that was coming. And now the imagery we're going to have, or the vision that John's going to receive, the symbols that he's going to be shown are going to involve a woman, a child, and a dragon. So now things are going to really get interesting. And as we move forward into this text, let's just go ahead and answer number 2 on page 53. Who do we understand, at least again in the scope of our study, in this material, who does the woman refer to as best we can tell? All right, well, the woman refers to whom? Well, it refers to the church, right? Double check, make sure I got that right. I know he mentions it in there somewhere. At least he looks at it as the woman of chapter 12. as the church? What about the child? And again, some of this is up for debate and speculation because, truth be told, we have no idea necessarily exactly 100% what these things mean. But as best we can guess and put it all together, this is what we're going with. What about the child? Children of God, okay? And then what about the big old nasty dragon? Satan, okay? So that's going to be our focus, and at least to go ahead and understand, those are the ones we're talking about here as we go through chapters 12 and 13. So let's go ahead and get into it then. There in chapter 12, we're told a great sign appeared in heaven, okay? So already we're told that what is happening with John is that John is seeing a sign. He is seeing a vision. He is seeing something symbolic. He is seeing this imagery. And what does he see in heaven? Verse 1. All right, a woman described as being clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a garland of 12 stars. And then being with child, she cried out in labor and in pain to give birth. And so here's this vision, this woman, and then she's having a baby. And so that is the first thing that John is shown. But then another sign appears in heaven. And what is it? All right, the great fiery dragon. Fiery red dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 diadems on his head. So that sounds interesting. We're told his tail drew a third of the stars of the heavens, threw them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was ready to give birth to devour her child as soon as it was born. And so we have this dragon, Satan, waiting to pounce, waiting to devour the child as soon as the child was born. And she bore a male child who was to do what? Rule all the nations with a rod of iron. The child was caught up to God and his throne. And really, and I don't know, again, a lot of this is speculation anyway, but really the child there really sounds like whom? Christ. Sounds a lot like Christ, the Messiah, Jesus. And so that's a possibility as well. Seems to make sense. And so we're told, again, she bore a male child who was to rule the nations with a rod of iron. Her child was caught up to God and his throne. But then what happened to the woman? All right, she ran away. Where a place was prepared by God, they should feed her there 1,260 days. And so, again, we have this imagery of a woman bearing a child, a male child. The child is caught up to God, taken away. The woman is still there. She is really in danger. She runs away. She flees to the wilderness where a place was prepared by God, where she was taken care of. Again, we're given a number, interestingly enough. And again, think of the church in this situation. Think of the persecution that had come upon them. Think of the coming destruction upon Jerusalem and what they were even running away from, as God was sparing his people to have to endure what Jerusalem would, at least in the coming judgment, that Rome was going to be destroying them. And so that's the picture we have so far. And a war breaks out on earth, right? Oh, no, in heaven. We're told, at least the reference is there, that a war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought with the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought as well. But did they prevail? No. Nor was a place found for them in heaven any longer. And this is where we have to be careful also with As we're reading through Revelation, as we've been talking about symbolic, figurative language, because this is where, a lot of people take things literally. And these visions and these signs that are given, and people will say, well, this is telling us that at one time, a long time ago, there literally was a war in heaven. Satan tried to fight against God. Satan lost, so God cast Satan down to the earth, and that's where Satan came from. But I don't think that's what this is trying to tell us, to teach us, to show us. Again, this is imagery. This is symbolic imagery of what is to come, of what we're talking about. And even in the context, if we're going to stick with the context of Revelation and the progression of the events, the progression of the signs and the stories that are told, then it really does not make sense to take this as a literal war happening in heaven a long time ago, because this is talking about things that would come, things that either did happen recently or things that would be coming very soon. But this is the picture that we are given. This war, this battle, the dragon, what we're going to find out next is Satan fights against God's angels. And so we're told, verse 9, the great dragon was cast out, the serpent of old called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. He was cast to the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. And then what was heard in verse 10? Good news, right? A salvation and strength in the kingdom of our God and the power of his Christ have come. For the accuser of our brethren, who accused them before our God day and night, has been cast down. And they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, and they did not love their lives even to death. Therefore rejoice, O heavens, and you who dwell in them. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and the sea, for the devil has come down to you, having great wrath, because he knows that he has a, what? Short time. So this is talking about, again, in this rejoicing, is the victory of Jesus over Satan, really the victory of his people, of his church over Satan. Because, remember, Jesus conquered death. Jesus beat Satan already. The Hebrews writer talks about how Jesus came to destroy the one who has the power of death, that is Satan. Jesus has gained victory over Satan and death, and so his people have now gained victory over Satan and death. We have become victorious, his church, his people, and again, it's through his blood, the blood of the Lamb, and by the word of the gospel, the word of the testimony, confessing Christ to be the Messiah, the Christ of God and our Savior, who died on the cross and was raised from the dead. And says of them that they did not even love their lives to death. It means they were willing. They were willing to die for their faith in the Lamb, in Jesus. They were willing to suffer persecution. They were willing to be killed for it. And so we see this imagery being shown. And I think ultimately what we can take out of this is clearly the victory that Jesus has had over Satan, and then also as well the victory that we have now over Satan. That finally Jesus has come. Jesus has conquered sin and death, has conquered Satan. Jesus has beat Satan. And so have we in Christ and through Christ. We win. We have victory. We have conquered. And I think, again, that is what we are being shown here. And that is what this rejoicing is. Rejoicing in salvation of God. But a woe is pronounced upon those who are referred as the inhabitants of the earth. Because what is coming on them? What's coming? Yeah, not good things. Right? Not good things. And the devil, what's he going to try to do? What's that? Yeah. He knows he's got a limited time. He knows that, he's been beaten ultimately. And he knows that he's only got so much time. But in that time, he's going to do everything he can to destroy who? Church, God's people. But ultimately, that's where, we win anyway. Because even though Satan was successful, and as he talks about, or as the author talks about in the material, even though Satan was successful at destroying a lot of Christians, well, number one, he could only destroy their body. They ended up they get to go be with God and have eternal rest and life. Number two, he didn't get all of them. He didn't destroy the church. He didn't cause it to cease to exist. It is still existing today. Ultimately, again, even though Satan may be able to destroy parts and pieces of the Lord's church physically, spiritually, he can do nothing to us. And that's the hope and victory we have in Jesus. Bob?
It's all crystal clear to me.
Yeah.
Are we saying, thinking that the woman is the church?
Yes.
Is that right? Well, in my simple mind, the church is begun on the day of Pentecost. Okay?
Sure.
We're putting the church person in Christ. If we're referring to the child as Christ. You see what I mean? If you're saying the woman is the church, and then and she gives birth to the child.
Sure.
The church.
Well, and that's where some would probably say, as this one would, that the child probably refers to the children of God.
But you see my point?
Yeah, I got
You're
you.
putting the church before
Right.
Christ in this
I got you.
scenario.
Sure.
Which
Right.
I don't understand.
Sure, right. Well, and again, we can't get it all perfectly right. To the best of our ability, we can. But that's a good thought, good point. That's probably why we refer to, or at least the author of this one does, to the child referring to the offspring of the woman, of the church, the Christians being. Any other thoughts, questions? Back here, John, this is John.
Is referring to faithful Israel, meaning the church, and
Yeah.
faithful for the church. No,
Sure.
faithful.
Sure. And I think that fits very well too, for sure. Any other thoughts, questions so far? All right. Well then, verse 13. What does the dragon do? Yeah. The dragon saw that he had been cast to the earth. He persecuted the woman who gave birth to the male child. But the woman was given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness to her place where she is nourished for a time and times and half a time from the presence of the serpent. And what does the serpent try to do? Tries to drown her, tries to catch her with a flood. Does it work? No, because the earth opens up and basically swallows up that flood, the water from the dragon. Verse 17, the dragon was enraged with the woman and went to make war with the rest of her offspring, who do what? Keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ, right? John Simmons. Got too many Johns in here.
So, again, the key to Revelation is time.
Yeah.
Where are we in time, and when is this particular time talking about? So, if you're not careful, you can start trying to go grab things out of sequence.
Yeah.
The completed church obviously is here.
Right.
But if the completed church is here, then the baby is not a baby. The baby will be an adult Christ who had already conquered.
Right.
But the key also is to understand that this passage seems to talk about different times as it goes through it, referring to the end, the beginning, the middle, and all of those different things. The other part we've got to remember, though, is that were the children of Israel persecuted when Christ came as a child? Yes. In fact, badly persecuted. They lost their firstborn son in that area, right?
Sure.
So horrible things were going on.
Right.
It didn't get better. And then you think about all the people that followed Christ while he was alive. They were also persecuted. There were also problems there. And again, that only got worse as time progressed. So I think if you see this story unfolding, depending on where you think about it, honestly, sort of fits in lots of different places. And
Sure.
that's the problem.
Right.
If we're not careful, we'll get very dogmatic that it has to be this one point here,
Right.
and then you'll build a whole religion on that point. It's not
Sure. Right. Absolutely. That's why a lot of this we can only speculate and do the best we can with it, for sure. But that's why we're trying to focus as well on the big picture, the big message, because at the end of the day, whether we get it all exactly right, the one thing we do know is we have victory in who? In Jesus. And that's ultimately the takeaway. That's the message of Revelation, is hope for his people, conquering over Satan, conquering over death, conquering even persecution, and one day being with God in heaven, for sure. All right. So then chapter 13. All right, so the dragon's not happy again. Satan's doing everything he can to inflict God's people or afflict God's people. He's going to do everything he can to destroy God's people. But so far, he is not going to win, and later he's not going to win. Although he is able to do some damage, as we've seen, and some will suffer, some will be persecuted, some will die. But ultimately, again, we have victory in Jesus. Well, now we see in chapter 13 some more workings of this dragon, of Satan, that John then says that I stood on the sand. This is chapter 13, verse 1. I stood on the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rising up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his horns 10 crowns, and on his heads a blasphemous name. And the beast which I saw was like a leopard. His feet were like the feet of a bear, his mouth like the mouth of a lion. The dragon gave him power, his throne, and great authority. So who is this beast working for? Satan, for the devil. Satan has given this beast power, has given him his throne, given him his great authority on this earth to do all kinds of evil things. He says, I saw one of his heads as if it had been mortally wounded, and his deadly wound, though, was healed, and all the world marveled, and unfortunately did what? Followed the beast. And in following the beast, they were really following whom? Satan. And we are told that they worshipped the dragon who gave authority to the beast, and they worshipped the beast, saying, who is like the beast? Who is able to make war with him? And he was given a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and he was given authority to continue for 42 months. Then he opened his mouth in blasphemy against whom? God, to blaspheme his name, his tabernacle, and those who dwell in heaven. And it was granted to him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. And authority was given him over every tribe, tongue, and nation. All who dwell on the earth will worship him, whose names have not been written where? All right, in the Lamb's book of life, who was slain from the foundation of the world. So those not in the Lamb's book of life will be those who are not going to follow Christ, not going to follow Jesus, and instead they are going to end up following Satan. And if anyone has an ear, let him hear. He who leads into captivity shall go into captivity. He who kills with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints. God would ultimately bring vengeance and judgment upon those who are doing these great evils. Some suggest, even as the author here, that maybe this is again referring to Rome and emperors of Rome, because emperors of Rome were all about what? About themselves. Yeah, they thought they were gods or claimed to be God himself. They wanted to be worshipped, and they wanted everybody to worship them as a god. So it certainly is a possibility that fits Rome, and Rome coming against Jerusalem. And unfortunately, many did go along with it. Many did become worshipers of idolatry, really, ultimately. And so again, this was going to happen, blasphemy against God. But again, it still talks about those, the saints, written in the book of the Lamb. They would not be overcome, they would be overcome technically, but they would not worship whom? They wouldn't follow whom? Satan, right? They'll be faithful to God. They will not follow the beast. They will not follow Satan. They will not give in. They will not worship the emperor, if that is the case. But instead will be faithful to God and be faithful followers of Jesus. And the sea beast, again, at least in the questions, is talked about, could possibly refer to whom? Rome. Because now another beast comes up, and a beast comes up from where? Verse 11. Out of the earth. Another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb and spoke like a dragon. And so it seems to be, he could maybe look innocent, but really not innocent at all. He exercises all authority of the first beast in his presence, and causes the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. And so again, who does this beast serve? The devil, okay? Just like the first beast did. He performs great signs, so that he even makes fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. He deceives those who dwell on the earth by those signs, which he was granted to do in the sight of the beast, telling those who dwell on the earth to make an image to the beast who was wounded by the sword and lived. And he was granted power to breathe to the image of the beast, or the breath, read that wrong. He was granted power to give breath to the image of the beast, but the image of the beast should both speak and cause many as would not worship the image of the beast to be what? Killed. So those who didn't worship the beast, those who didn't follow Satan, those who would not give in to these things, then often what happened was what? They were killed. Just like all the way back in the days of Nebuchadnezzar, when Nebuchadnezzar built that image, wanted everybody to worship this image that he had made. The threat was, if you don't, what's going to happen? You're going to die. And so much the same here. But thankfully there were those who were not willing to give in, who were not willing to worship the image or the beast or Satan. And we're told that he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads, and that no one may buy or sell except one who has the marks or the name of the beast or the number of his name. And so, again, showing favor, showing partiality to those who would follow him, but those who don't, we're going to suffer, we're going to be persecuted, and we're going to be killed. And then finally, verse 18, he says, "Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. Now, we all want to know, what does that mean? What does that mean? Well, really, we don't know. Not for sure, not like they did. Probably one guess that we often hear, even as the author suggests in this book, is possibly referring to Nero, which does fit this time, which does fit, Nero persecuting the church, so on and so forth. He talks about that on page 53 of how Nero's name in Hebrew adds up to the number 666. But again, whether that's really the case or not is anyone's guess, because really we have no idea. Wayne?
Another theory I've heard one time is that 7 is used as like a perfect number.
Yeah.
And so 666 just keeps coming short of it.
Sure.
Not,
Sure.
it's other than.
Right. So a really bad dude,
Other theory.
nevertheless, yeah. John over here.
The 666, I often refer to the numerology.
Yeah.
Greek, Hebrew, of being able to spell out that form of the word zero.
Sure.
I've also heard the Latin does the same.
Okay.
But back earlier in the chapter,
Yeah.
it talks about the beast that was wounded and yet is recovered.
Right.
There was a, I don't know if you call it a revelation or what, but whose story was told that Nero was wounded and presumed dead by many.
Hmm.
Yet that he recovered and regained his rule.
Okay.
And you may not be correct on this, but what I'm calling right now is that Nero used this in people's wonder of him being killed and him being alive, and that's where it was Caesar worship and threats of what he can.
Okay.
He was, in fact, deity as the Greeks and the Romans looked upon him.
Right.
And therefore, I'm not sure that Nero definitely required worship, but to see this, Caesar after him did.
Yeah. Okay. And that could very well fit this too, for sure. So seems to make sense. Seems to fit as best we can tell. And Nero certainly was a very wicked man who would end up persecuting the church very much, very greatly in a lot of bad ways. Was not a good dude at all. And again, obviously there was something here in reading this, in the writing of this, even as he says in verse 18, that here is wisdom, let he who has understanding calculate. Obviously, this had to be something that the readers of this time would have understood. An understanding that we obviously don't have exactly like they did, but they would have understood this. They would have been able to, understand how to decipher this, how to calculate it, how to figure out what John was indeed talking about, what these were referring to. And so, again, we're missing some information ourselves. We weren't there back then, and we can only do the best we can with it, really. John Simmons.
Forgot to mention something else that
Yeah.
I meant to bring up. And that is just like in the beginning, the book of Genesis. Jewish language itself, and really it's filtered into our language as well, always restated things.
Yeah.
Typically 3 times.
Sure.
And so in the book of Genesis, in the beginning, God formed the heavens and the earth. And then it goes on and talks about everything that happened to make that happen. So we have to be careful again, alluded to it before.
Sure.
When we're reading things and we see what looks like a summary, and then all of a sudden it's talking about something that had to have taken place earlier.
Sure.
That is completely normal because, again, we didn't have these numbers on this letter, right?
Right.
That is exactly what a typical Jewish statement would have done. It's also a little bit similar to Greek as well, so all follows some of the same similar things. And we, again, still to this day, when we present a sermon perhaps, we say, hey, we're going to talk about God creating the heavens and the earth, and then we go into the details.
Right.
And then we probably restate it at the end again. So to see those same things happening in this letter should not surprise us. But again, unfortunately, we're already kind of confused by the time we get to this chapter.
Sure.
There's a lot of big language, there's a lot of things going on, and we've already grabbed onto a few other things and are confident those have to be the case.
Sure.
We keep adding these to that list. It just makes it more confusing.
Sure. Absolutely. And so that's what we're going to do. Keep, again, try to understand it as best we can and be careful with it, too, for sure. Over here.
When you talk about prophecy, most people look at prophecy as foretelling the future.
Right.
And the people that lived back during the days in which God wrote it, they were read it, they could see some of the things perhaps that
Sure.
If John told us it would come to pass. But in
Right.
our day and time, can we look at these passages in Scripture and say these things are in our future yet?
No, I don't think so. Not all of them. Right? No. Yeah. And that's one of the dangers which he talks about in here. Again, as we've stated from the get-go of Revelation, the events of Revelation, as best we could tell, refer to something that happened in their time. Things that happened in their time, they would have known, they would have seen, they would have heard. And that's where we got to be careful, because men have, in our religious society, taken parts of Revelation, or a lot of Revelation, and made it futuristic even for us. But that just really does not fit or work with what Revelation is about, for sure. All right, any other thoughts or questions this morning so far? We got a couple minutes left. Some of the questions we've already looked at. Let's see. Number 3, who were the forces that tried to stop the church in its beginning? The Jews? Rome? Satan? Yeah, which he was behind all of that. Did they succeed? Number 4. No. What forces can stop the church today? Well, that's true. But what forces can stop the church today? Well, none. Ultimately, again, Satan may be able to do damage, but Satan is never going to be able to utterly wipe out the church and the Lord's people. And ultimately, the church will have victory anyway, no matter what Satan does. Even as Jesus said that he would build his church, and Hades and death would not prevail against it. We have victory over Satan and victory over death. After the fall of Jerusalem, did the persecution of Christians stop? No, because it kept going quite a lot. We already talked about number 6. Let's see, number 7. Number 8. All right. True and false real quick. The dragon and the devil are the same being. True. A literal war was fought between Michael and the dragon in heaven before the throne of God. False. The offspring of the woman are those who keep the commandments of God and the testimony of Christ. True. The sea beast refers to Russia, and the lesser beast refers to China. False, because again, that's trying to make it futuristic even for us. Those who worship the beast will have their names written in the Lamb's Book of Life. False. And the number 666 in Revelation corresponds to a man in the 21st century. False, because again, it's not futuristic for us. All right, any other thoughts or questions this morning? Wayne, and then we'll come over here.
You know, we have our battles against Satan all the time.
Sure.
He's trying to get us, but in reality, that's just part of the war. The war is against God, and Satan is always trying to defeat God, but he has these little battles that he can win over.
Sure.
We're ready.
Right.
Even though he can't win the war, he does win battles, but
Sure.
if you don't fight him off, and then that's why in the beginning it said, to him who overcomes,
Right.
then he explains what will happen. So
Sure.
we individually have to overcome.
Right. And in Christ we can. With God we can. If we'll faithfully follow the Lord, we can beat Satan. But we got to fight the battles every day. And again, Satan may gain some victories, but ultimately, in the end, if we're faithful, we're going to win. Right? John Smith.
We have the advantage, as we look at this, of history.
Yeah.
Back to something that was said, that was shortly kind of past.
Right.
Right. So that's our advantage.
Right.
When we think about them, when we think about them, we think of these symbols as being somewhat familiar to
Sure.
the recipients.
Right.
One thing that we often neglect to think about is who are these churches? This was a church
Yeah.
nation. This was written to.
Right.
Paul traveled through those areas. He imparted spiritual gifts to people in those
Sure.
churches. And one of the gifts was given discernment.
Right.
So,
It's
people
true.
with spiritual gifts had the ability to read this and
Right.
know what was intended by all these symbols. Much better than even from our historical perspective.
Sure. And I'm sure, like, yeah, and what John's saying is, spiritual gifts probably played a large part in the saints of this time being able to understand what was being said. And I think that's a good point. For sure. Yeah. Not at least like we do, but they shared it around, I'm sure. I don't know how many copies they made, but yeah, right. All right, other thoughts, questions? John, back there.
I like in Revelation 13:8 talks about, but all who dwell will be done with it, and those who are written in the Lamb's life from salvation. We're all reminded of Ephesians 1:4, and begin out the word and about the salvation of Christ.
Sure.
We walk in the salvation of the world.
Right. Yeah, and that's a good point too. Good reference, and that's who we want to be. We want to be in the Lamb's Book of Life and keep following Him, serving Him, living for Him for sure. All right, other thoughts, questions? All right, well, that'll finish lesson 8 then. So next week, Lord willing, come ready with lesson 9. And we'll get into chapters 14 through 16. So come ready with that. All right, thank you very much.